In the UK, they usually say a derby, and in the US, they say more a derby. And to complicate a little bit more the semantic discussion, some people also call them a blucher. But there's a difference between a blucher and a derby that we're going to explain later. The first thing I want you to remember is the difference between an Oxford and a derby, and it's very easy to explain. I will show it to you immediately. This is an Oxford, you remember. In the former episode of Tutorial Talks, we covered this very classical shoe, which is a lace-up shoe, in which you have the eyelets that are directly perforated inside the body of the shoe, inside what we call the vamp of the shoe. As you can see, a derby has what we call a shoe tab, which is stitched on top of the body of the shoe. So you see the difference? On the Oxford, there's no tab. On this, there's an additional piece of leather which is stitched on the body of the shoe. This one is a very beautiful and stylish derby, which is called a two-eyelet derby, but previously the derby were more created for outdoors and for more casual occasion, as Sonya will explain to you now.
You may remember earlier we said that before the 1840s, men wore boots with suits. Well, one theory is that the man who propelled the shoe forward over the boot, besides the fact that the roads were improving at the time, so the shoes wouldn't be getting so muddy and dirty when you wore them with suits. But the man's name was Edward Smith Stanley, and this is a theory. He was the Earl of Derby, and this is one reason we think that it's called the Derby shoe. But he had big feet, and we could say even voluptuous feet, and he was having difficulty wearing his Oxford-style boots, and so he decided that he would have a shoe designed for him that would accommodate his foot, which I've also read that had a high instep. So this shoe was considered much more comfortable, this design. And so this was developed for him, and from then on, other people who had maybe the same issues with a larger foot followed suit, or maybe they liked the design, and so they followed and thus propelled forward the Derby shoe.
So as Sonya just explained to you, this shoe was created for some comfort issues, but it was mainly used until very recently as an outdoor shoe, something more casual and more easy to wear than an Oxford shoe. Recently, I would say in the last 2 decades, or maybe specifically in the last decade, the heavy shoe, which is a derby, you know, this additional leather is adding weight and a little bit bulk to the shoe. So this is why it was more outdoor. Had been evolving slightly to more refined designs. This very sporty shoe has been evolving recently to something very sophisticated that is definitely now a town shoe, which is what we call a two-eyelet derby. This is a two-eyelet derby, which is extremely popular these days. So it's the same idea. You have tabs that are sewn directly on the shoe, that's additional, but it's more refined. So you understand that this outdoor shoe has been evolving slowly into a town shoe, and today, honestly, this kind of shoe can be as business and as formal as an Oxford shoe. But that's another thing that we want to explain to you, is that in some country, derbies are called blucher, and Sonya will explain you why.
This was something that was very confusing for me initially, because I would hear blucher and derby interchangeably used, and it took me a while to figure it out. But after a little bit of research and asking a few experts about the matter, I learned that it's basically a design issue. If you look at this blucher shoe, which by the way was inspired from a military boot back in the 1800s, the boot was actually cut off to form a shoe because it was actually a very utilitarian piece. And so if you notice, the design factor I'm referring to is this area right here, the eyelet tab, which is shaped, I call it like a hockey stick. And it's a very good way to define the two, because if you look at the derby, it's not It's cut at such a sharp angle. Look at this specific design factor and you'll know the difference between a Blucher and a Derby shoe.
And I would like, Sonya, thank you for this brilliant explanation about the Blucher and the Derbies.
Wasn't that brilliant?
Yeah, that was very brilliant. The aim of this series is to give you some historical reference, and as I know, our readers at Parisian Gentlemen, they love to understand what is behind everything. This is why we take the time to give you some historical references about every type of shoe. And the last one, which is technically not exactly a derby, as you can see here, because there's only one tab which is sewn on the body of the shoe. It's actually, technically, it's a half derby, because you only have the tab on one side and not on the other side. This one is called a monk strap. So why a monk strap? I would like Sonya to explain to you why we call it a monk strap.
It was worn by monks, but initially as a sandal. So, as you know, we can't wear sandals year-round. So the monks literally just took the same design as the sandal, made a closure, and thus we have the monk strap. And this is a very simple explanation, and I think that this is probably one of the biggest hits in the last 5 years in classic men's shoe. Especially the Italians have propelled this during Petit Uomo. A lot of times this is worn with the straps open, just to give more of a sprezzatura type feel to it, and it doesn't look like this trend's going away, it's only growing stronger. So this is a very popular shoe, and I think it should be part of every man's wardrobe.
Thank you, Sonya, for this explanation about the historical meaning of the monk shoe. Something I want to add is that many shoe lovers in the world may know is that this double monk strap was popularized in France at the beginning with John Lobb in Paris. Actually, John Lobb created this double monk strap in the mid-80s when the Hermes Group, after buying the John Lobb brand, decided to move to the ready-to-wear industry. And that was their first ready-to-wear by John Lobb in Paris. They decided to make this double monk strap their signature shoe. It was called the William, and many shoe lovers should know about that. But this has become a staple in every shoe lover wardrobe, and I really, really invite you all to make the acquisition of such a shoe, because not only it's beautiful to wear, it's interesting to wear, it's a stylistic statement, but it's also extremely comfortable for any type of fit. This ends our second episode on the different type of men's shoe. We hope to see you for the next episode of Sartorial Talk that will be dedicated to the loafers and to the boots. And in the meantime, cheers!